tree in flower definitely makes a strong statement in the landscape. For example, this dogwood can be seen from the far corners of our garden. Now, it seems that there's a small handful of flowering trees that are very widely used in the landscape, and some of those deservingly so, like our red bud, which is spectacular. Now, there's others like the Bradford pear that are quite problematic. That tree has some structural issues. So I want to share a few different species that we can use to add some flowers to the springtime. And the ones we're looking at today come into flower after the red buds. So the first, of course, is our flowering dogwood, Cornus florida. And this is a native understory species. And being understory, that means it grows below an upper tree canopy. And that tells us a bit about its habitat. It likes to have a shady site, especially in Oklahoma. And so I like to look for a northern exposure or an eastern exposure along the edge of a larger shade tree to give it a good habitat. Now, in the springtime, it's covered with these magnificent white flowers, but if you look closely, the flowers themselves are actually fairly small. They're in the center here, but what the showy part is they're surrounded by large white bracts, and that's what gives it its beautiful display. Now, these flowers will be followed by fruits that are enjoyed by many species of bird in the landscape. The Chinese fringe tree, Chionanthus retusus, comes into full bloom just as the dogwoods are beginning to fade. Now, this tree looks like it's covered in snow when it comes into full bloom. And the flowers hang in panicles that stand above the leaves. The Chinese fringe tree, as the name suggests, is an Asian species, but it's fairly well adapted here in Oklahoma. It does need a little bit protection from the wind. It'll flower best in full sun, but it can also tolerate a shady location. Now, this one has more of a single trunk, but sometimes they'll grow with a multiple trunk, and you could train it either way. It also has a beautiful peeling bark. We also have a native fringe tree, Chionanthus virginicus, and we've only just recently planting these here in the Arboretum. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they perform. They're not yet large enough to show off their flowers, but they will flower a little bit earlier than their Chinese relative. One of the most remarkable trees in flower is the red buckeye, Aesculus pavia. And those big red flowers stand up above the foliage, and if you look closely, they have a nice tube shape. They're very attractive to hummingbirds as well as butterflies that pollinate these. The foliage is palmately compound like a hand and tends to droop down. It's very shiny green. The native habitat of the red buckeye is in forests along stream banks, so that tells you a bit about its requirements. It definitely benefits from a little bit of shade, and it likes a wet spot. We have it along a swale where it's getting a lot of water. If you don't have a wet area in the landscape, be sure to give it plenty of irrigation. Now, we have a yellow flowered variety, a little cousin to this, and that's the Texas buckeye. This is Aesculus glabra, variety arguta, and it's native to the south central plains, including about the eastern 2/3 of Oklahoma. The flowers are a little bit shorter. They're still tubular, but a little bit shorter than the red. They have a bit of a orange striping in the throat. And the foliage is very similar, but there's a larger number of leaflets, usually about 7 or 9, but sometimes even up to 11. The tree is from a more southern region, making it a bit more tolerant to hot and dry conditions, though it does still require regular irrigation. At its mature size, the Texas buckeye grows to about 20 feet tall. Many viburnum species grow to the size of a small tree and can even be pruned up to give them more of a tree form. Now, this one is the rusty blackhaw. It's viburnum rufigulum, and this one grows to a mature height of about 18 feet. It likes to have a shady location and works very well as an understory species. Many of the viburnums have very fragrant flowers, which add that wonderful element to the landscape, and they're also quite drought tolerant. Another great thing, the flowers are visited by a wide variety of insects, including butterflies, and most of the viburnums will put on a fruit that feeds the birds throughout the fall and winter.